Standing there, throw a punch. Shakes his head, throw a punch. Moves his eyebrows, throw a punch. Uppercut, dodge, then throw a punch. Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, first called Punch-Out and also later called Punch-Out, is one of the great sports games of the early Nintendo era. Its quick action and demands on your reflexes frustrated kids and adults throughout the 1980s, added to the legend of the world-famous boxer, and ultimately became the 17th best-selling game in Nintendo history, moving more than 3 million units and helping to propel boxing into the consciousness of a whole new generation. The game is not without its controversy. Its part-time headliner, Mike Tyson, gave the game additional credence and attention, but also caused Nintendo no shortage of headaches. Tyson was dropped from future editions of the game, but not for the reasons that you might think. In the end, Tyson's involvement in the Punch-Out series became more of a footnote, a large one, and an important one, but a footnote nonetheless. Let's talk about Punch-Out by busting a few myths. First, the game was not inspired by Mike Tyson. In fact, when the game first made its premiere as an arcade game in 1984, Mike Tyson was still about a year away from making his professional boxing debut. The game is unique for a variety of reasons. Like the Nintendo game so many of us know and love, it required pattern recognition and quick reflexes. The release of the game had a few pretty unique features. When your boxer moves, the camera and opponent moves too, enhancing the sense of immersion. Furthermore, you basically played the game in a modified first-person view. Yes, you still saw the body of your boxer, but it was drawn in a wireframe, ensuring that you could see your opponent. The machine itself actually had two monitors. The top monitor displayed your points, opponent's name, and stamina meter, while the bottom monitor displayed the actual gameplay. In fact, part of the reason for the game's creation, and the use of two monitors, was that Nintendo had ordered more monitors than necessary in the course of producing their Donkey Kong arcade. When demand cooled off, Nintendo was left with too many monitors, and needed to do something with them. Genyo Takeda came up with a two-monitor plan for Punch-Out, and the production was underway. The gameplay of the arcade game was relatively similar to the gameplay of the video game. Your job is to knock out your opponent as fast as possible in order to advance to the next round. Once you knock out the last opponent, the game actually continues cycling back upon itself at a harder difficulty. And that's actually it. You can't beat the game. It just loops until you get knocked out 3 times in a round. Other facets of the game made it something special. The music for the game was created by Koji Kondo, the legendary Nintendo composer, who would go on to create some of Nintendo's most well-known musical compositions. The game also introduced some of Punch-Out's most well-known opponents, including Glass Joe, Piston Hurricane, Mr. Sandman, and more. The game was one of the most popular arcade games of 1984. A lot of its success had to do with its replayability. As correctly noted by the Ultimate History of Video Games, the game was a puzzle game that masqueraded as a boxing one. The goal wasn't just to punch, but to recognize patterns and apply those patterns quickly. Funny enough, Nintendo knew that the power of celebrity could help move the game even before Tyson was involved. Nintendo got famous boxer Larry Holmes, aka the Eastern Assassin, to show off and endorse the game. The success of the game convinced Nintendo to release Super Punch-Out the same year. That game didn't really have much in the way of new graphics, but it did introduce more opponents, a harder difficulty, and some additional features like the ability to duck. It's actually kind of wild that a sequel to the game would be pushed out so quickly. Both games were hits. Such hits that it quickly became apparent that Nintendo was going to need to do a version for the Famicom. That responsibility fell to Nintendo Research and Development Unit No. 3, a division within Nintendo that worked on arcade games and their subsequent console spin-offs. Genyo Takeda, who had produced the arcade games, was tapped as the director of the Nintendo version. Takeda had a challenge. The Famicom was good, but it wasn't that good, and it didn't have the memory or processing power to reproduce the wireframe graphics of the arcade game. As a result, the camera was backed out and up, providing the now well-known overhead view. The main character was given a story. He was Little Mac, a 17-year-old amateur boxer who was trying to make it big and who was coached by Doc Lewis, himself a former heavyweight boxing champion. For story and graphic reasons, Mac was made small, weighing a mere 107 pounds. However, Takeda and the game's developers had additional problems that needed to be addressed. They wanted to make the enemies in the game large, but sprites were limited to around 8 by 16 pixels. To adjust for this, Nintendo literally invented a special chip, the MMC2, which allowed for opposing fighters to be bigger and tower over Mac, truly enhancing the underdog perspective of the game's protagonist. As best I can tell, this game is one of the only ones to use this chip. The game also features other differences, including more opponents, cutscenes between circuits, and the guest appearance of Mario as a referee. Funny enough, Takeda never actually got permission from Nintendo to add Mario as the referee, but it seems that no one noticed and the addition was final. In an interview, Shigeru Miyamoto would say, quote, "We didn't have an approval system when using Mario images back then, and it went right past my check," end quote. Digitized speech from the arcade game was also removed and replaced with text bubbles. These text bubbles varied from taunts to, "Oh god, that didn't age well," ooh, as well as advertisements to enlist in the Nintendo Fan Club, the precursor to Nintendo Power. Some names were also changed. Vodka Drunkinsky, the Russian fighter, good lord stereotyping, was replaced with Soda Popinski, in keeping with Nintendo's commitment to not reference alcohol in their games. The game came with 11 opponents. Like many other Nintendo games at the time, Nintendo reused sprites to save memory. In fact, every sprite is reused save for King Hippo. This is done via a palette swap, in which one graphic is given new coloring. In Punch-Out, the palette swaps are Glass Joe and Don Flamenco, Von Kaiser and Great Tiger, Piston Honda and Mike Tyson / Mr. Dream, Bald Bull and Mr. Sandman, and Soda Popinski and Super Macho Man. As players move through the game, they fight their way through different circuits and become champions. When the player wins a circuit, they get featured in a newspaper clip that also gives a numerical passkey. This passkey allows players to skip rounds the next time they play and acted more or less as a save state. Interesting side note, one of the newspaper screens features the headline, "Daddy, come back home." Why? I have no idea. So that's weird. Like the arcade game, playing the game and ultimately moving on meant that players had to memorize an increasingly difficult series of opponents, understanding how they moved and knowing exactly when to dodge, block, or throw a punch. For performing certain moves, players could earn stars that could be activated by hitting the select button. Proper timing of these punches could result in major damage, or even a knockout. Indeed, the key to this game was learning the right moments to throw punches, and that was how players typically became good. However, some secrets in the game went undiscovered for 22 years. In a 2009 interview, designer Makoto Wada said that no one discovered the secret to winning the Bald Bull fight. Throw a body blow right when a camera flashes. Other new mechanics compared to the arcade game included the use of hearts. Little Mac started every round with a certain number of hearts. Getting punched or having a punch blocked would result in a loss of a heart, and losing all hearts meant that Mac entered a fatigue state in which he couldn't throw punches. If players were defeated, either by knockout or decision, they get a rematch, unless that loss occurs in one of the 3 title fights. If that happens, Mac falls in the rankings and has to refight fights he already won. However, if Mac loses the last fight to Mr. Dream or Mike Tyson, the game ends. There are 3 circuits in the game: the minor circuit, the major circuit, and the world circuit. Winning the world circuit advances you to the final Dream fight. Nintendo, having found success with the use of celebrities and celebrity licensed products, realized that they could enhance the success of the game by getting a big name on it. The biggest name in boxing, of course, was Mike Tyson, the boxing powerhouse, who had one boxing championship after another. As the game was being developed, Minoru Arakawa, president of Nintendo of America, saw Tyson box during the 1986 Consumer Electronics Show. He was in awe of Tyson's ability as a boxer. As Arakawa himself said, quote, "He was so powerful and strong, and we all fell in love with him. So we decided to license him. From what I've been able to find, Nintendo gave Tyson $50,000 for the use of his likeness and name on the game, although the deal was actually finalized before Tyson won the World Boxing Council Championship in 1986. Tyson did win that belt, setting the game up for even greater success. Tyson not only lent his likeness to the game, but also appeared in its marketing, including sitting for some commercials. Tyson would later criticize the amount of money he was paid, calling it, quote, "a really bad deal," although he actually thought he was paid $1.2 million, not $50,000. I couldn't find any validation confirming Tyson's claim of $1.2 million, but there is a slew of press that said it was only $50,000, and I think that's the accurate number, which, in all fairness to Tyson, is a horrendously low number, even in 1986. So there's a common myth out there. Tyson was removed from the game due to his rape charges and conviction. That actually wasn't the case. Tyson was arrested for rape in July 1991, but the license expired in 1990 as part of the 3-year deal that Nintendo had made with Tyson. By this time, an awful lot had changed in the boxing world. In early 1990, Tyson lost the heavyweight boxing titles to Buster Douglas in one of the biggest boxing upsets in history. That led Douglas to become the world champion and, incidentally, get his own boxing game with Sega. The Nintendo deal expired, and the game was re-released as Punch-Out. Tyson was replaced by Mr. Dream, a boxer of similar power in the game. Mr. Dream was supposed to look like the boxer Rocky Marciano, a legendary undefeated boxer in his own right. Tyson himself said he never played the game until 2013, when he played it on Fox Sports 1, fighting Glass Joe. Interestingly enough, the Mr. Dream fight doesn't have to be the final one. By entering a special password and inputting A, B, and select as the last number, instead of start, players can travel to a secret world circuit. In this circuit, known as Another World Circuit, you fight King Hippo and Great Tiger, then the World Circuit, then Tyson. If you lose any fight in this match, the game is over, no second chances. More random. Entering the code 800-422-2602, which was Nintendo's customer service line, would prompt a busy signal. Hopefully, dialing the number in the real world would actually get you through. The game was released in September 1987 with a preview version, a gold coded preview version, given out to people who entered the Golf US Course Famicom tournament. In that version, Tyson is not present, and Super Macho Man is the final boss. By and large, critics love the game, and it routinely earned 9 out of 10 stars or higher in most reviews. The sprites, graphics, and addictive gameplay were almost universally praised, and the game created a legacy that still endures today. Sequels obviously came next, although a surprisingly low number have actually been released. Before a new version was made, Nintendo took their Game & Watch version of boxing and made it a Punch-Out version in 1988. It really doesn't look like the game. There is also Frank Bruno's Boxing, named after a well-known British boxer, which appeared on the Commodore 64 and ZX Spectrum. It's unknown if Nintendo had anything to do with this game, but as you can see, it looks pretty close to Punch-Out. Punch-Out went dark for a surprisingly long 7 years until the Super Nintendo version, Super Punch-Out, made its premiere. That game brings back the behind-the-back perspective of the arcade game. But newer technology allows for the wireframe to be removed and replaced with a translucent boxer. The gameplay is very similar to its predecessors, but the moving camera and camera angle make the game look much more like the arcade version than the Nintendo one. Super Punch-Out did not create quite the same commercial or critical impact as its predecessor, but it was still very well received. It was praised by most as a worthy successor to the original game, with its easy-to-understand gameplay and colorful opponents earning the most praise. Surprisingly, that was it for Punch-Out for another 15 years, with another game not appearing until 2009's Punch-Out made it to the Wii. That game was also highly regarded by most critics, particularly for taking the game's tried-and-true formula and adding the Wii's motion controls to the game. A prequel, Doc Lewis's Punch-Out, allowed Little Mac to battle Doc Lewis, his coach. That game did not see wide release, but was a platinum reward exclusively for Club Nintendo members. Mike Tyson's Punch-Out marked a sharp turn for Nintendo, which typically kept their games to more family-friendly topics, as opposed to games where players were rewarded for pummeling each other. I do wonder if that also isn't why they moved away from Mike Tyson and chose not to renew his license, even before Tyson was arrested and jailed. Even before that time, Tyson did have his controversies. He had married and divorced actress Robin Givens and had been accused of beating her during their marriage, an association that Nintendo clearly did not want tied to their brand. In fact, Nintendo was so adamant to remove Tyson from the game that at least one report suggested that they pulled games off of the shelves after the deal expired. Incidentally, that license expiration turned Mike Tyson Punch-Out cartridges into collector's items. They were on sale for $39 when they first premiered, but today you have to be prepared to drop a few $100s to get your hand on a copy in the box. The Tyson version is gone forever, at least through reputable channels. While you could box against Tyson if you download a ROM, all official versions of the game, including those re-released through the Switch Online, feature Mr. Dream. Mike Tyson remains one of the biggest sports stars to lend his likeness to a Nintendo game. In doing so, he absolutely elevated this boxing game and turned it from a moderately successful sports game into a legendary Nintendo game. Not only are there players who still play the game via the Switch Online, but a ton of speedrun categories, including single segment, blindfolded, and more, allow players to find new ways to challenge themselves and succeed. These speedrun entries are still really popular, and that alone speaks volumes about just what an impact this game has made. As always, thank you so much for watching this video, and I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like or subscribe, and please click on the next video that the almighty YouTube algorithm has served up for you. As always, my friends, have a wonderful day out there, and I hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as I liked making it. Take care!